Well, you know what else is different then, Josh? It's different than Taylor Dayne as well. Yep.
Right. I know this is I know this is like kind of a big. I don't know. You love Taylor Dayne in some respects, right?
I love Taylor Dayne's voice. It's fucking fantastic.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
hence, like this was one that how this came about was I am trying to be better in our journey at having some representation of chart specific,
yes.
artists that charted,
Yep.
And not everything's going to be in there, but I felt like in the 60s and 70s, we definitely had a void on some of that. And in the 80s, at the beginning, it was a little easier because some of these acts had been sort of retconned now, right, as important acts. And the 80s is really when that starts to happen. But there is another layer underneath that as well. And in the 90s and 2000s and 2010s, we're going to do a very good job of not just delving into the, supposedly artistically important albums, but I want to kind of get into the albums that were important, like for the zeitgeist and to understand the era. And so, yeah, you start looking at the charts, right? And you're like, who's getting shit tons of hits? And yeah, you process Madonna and Michael Jackson, but then it's sort of like, you look and it's not far before you say, well, holy shit, like Taylor Dayne has a bazillion like top 10 hits.
Right.
And so I said to myself, I don't think I've ever listened to like a Taylor Dayne album while feeling like I know 7 damn Taylor Dayne songs off the top of my head. Right. So
yes,
the combination of trying to be better about, looking at the charts mixed with the fact that I've always loved the voice. I've got a couple different funny Taylor Dayne stories as well that I'll weave into this as well. And this is another one that I absolutely remember my mom listening to and like my sister blaring like and dancing to, you know what I mean? So there's just, some of that to it as well. But that's how this one ended up on here. But and also the joy of you and Matt listening to this and having no idea if you'd secretly like it or hate it was also funny. So yeah.
Yeah. It's it's another reason we do Matt and John Sing the Hits too, because we get some of those bands that were popular.
Well, how familiar were you with the like 6 to 7 huge Taylor Dayne hits? Because 4 of them are on this album, and the other 3 are on the first album. So, so for context, right? Like this one, the big hits are the first 4 tracks on this album are like single. I mean, it's insane
apparent when you listen to it.
Well, yeah, and we'll talk about this. So I won't go into it, but this is her second album. The first one had "Tell It to My Heart," which is a massive song, and "Don't Rush Me," which is a massive song, and "Prove Your Love," which guess what, Josh, is also a massive song. So "I'll Always Love You" is also a pretty freaking massive song. Now those 4, right? Like tell it. So let's go through each. "Tell It to My Heart." How well do you know that one?
I think "Tell It to My Heart" and "Prove Your Love" were ones that I would know, but I didn't know her well enough to.
Oh, you don't know "Don't Rush Me"? That's a pretty freaking big song too.
If I do, I don't know by.
It's huge, yeah. But anyway.
But she's also one of those artists like I would know those songs, but I didn't know who sang it. So
our love could be so much more. Yeah, it's a huge song. It's gigantic hooks, which is of course the thing. But,
right.
So you weren't super familiar with these 4 huge hits?
No, I don't think I knew any of the songs on this.
So
album.
you didn't. So for reference, the big 4 singles on this are tracks 1 through. The whole album is 11 tracks, but the big 4 are "With Every Beat of My Heart," "I'll Be Your Shelter," "Love Will Lead You Back," and "Heart of Stone." Those are 4. I think 3 of them are top 10 hits. I know there's a couple ones in there, and I think "Heart of Stone's" like a top 15 or top 20 hit too. And I definitely remember the video in rotation. But we're not aware of any of these, huh?
No,
It's nearly impossible for me to process that you did not know, for example, "Love Will Lead You Back," which is,
I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because that song is so like adult contemporary, like soaring ballad that it probably was on some sort of radio station at some point, and I just never.
What you think it like
it
as in every radio station ever from years like 1989 to like present?
Yeah.
I think it's
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure at some point I heard that, but it wasn't on the same level as like a Madonna song that that you would come back to, or at least could identify.
Well, in what sense? To like your understanding, or do you feel like in the pop culture?
No, to my understanding, I
okay,
think
gotcha.
She's, unless you purposely seek out things when you're younger, it's hard to be as encyclopedic in your knowledge as you do in the show.
This is where I'd love to have Matt on this, because this might be
age
where
too.
our respective age, because the idea that like Taylor Dayne was not someone that you had to seek out, right? Not be aware.
Yeah.
That is like a lot of my memories of Taylor Dayne songs are from like the ages of 8 to 11. Like if you went to the roller rink, if you went somewhere, like you were going to be hearing like Don't Rush Me or Tell It to My Heart or With Every Beat of My Heart. These were like staple like songs that absolutely were like just omnipresent.
Okay.
I'd say.
Yeah, that probably is the difference too. Also, were there music videos associated that you remember
for
with
sure,
these?
because Taylor Dayne was one of my earliest crushes too.
Okay.
And also, true story, when I was in college, my freshman year girlfriend, I did not process this till one of my friends said it to me, bore somewhat of a resemblance to Taylor Dayne facially. And so my friend, referenced her randomly as Taylor Dayne. That's
funny.
His nickname for so. Mm-hmm.
So
no, but these were these were big videos,
and that's a big thing for you and Matt too, is you always have kind of that
gigantic hair, just gigantic hairs. For the first album, I think of gigantic hair, and then she changed her hair to like blonde, like striking blonde hair. You know what I mean? For the second one, so like there's these two distinct Taylor Dayne like image, and actually, if you look at like her album covers, Josh, I don't know if you have it up, but like
I do.
You can get both vibes from literally just looking at the album covers. It's kind of funny. So what'd you think? We covered all that. What'd you think?
So this is a classic example of what I feel like a record company putting all of their resources behind an artist, from production to probably songwriting to
they wanted her to sing rock was like their goal, but she kind of fought it and wanted to go more in the like standard / R&B era, like type stuff. Yeah. So that, with that being said, like it's how could you not like this album or find it like enjoyable to listen to, because it has such like an 80s production sheen to it. It's got it crosses. I feel like she was probably a big crossover artist with black audience as well. She kind of she's a first ballot invited to the barbecue. Like like I mean, she was basically with all of, I hate to say, but like I grew up in an era that had like you know what I mean, like lots of friends of mine that were like whose parents listened to art, and she was considered to be like a member of the R&B, royalty. Right. She was in like the Mariah Carey / like Lisa Stansfield, Dusty Springfield, Tina Marie, like you're invited to the cookout, group of white artists.
Well, she has a voice.
Gay audience too was huge for her, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
She has a voice that sounds kind of remarkably in like the Tina Turner type of sound. And how do I say this? I think she could, if you didn't know what she looked like, you could.
Oh, you think she was black?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's like said all the time about her. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to dance around it.
Okay.
That's 1,000%. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's part of the appeal, and her voice is, it's remarkable. It's really powerful, and she's like a modern example. Well, not modern anymore, but Christina Aguilera in terms of like power of her voice and stuff.
Vocal powerhouse. Yeah. She's Yeah, I remember telling you guys about Bobby Caldwell, who died the other day. He's another guy that like no one had any idea.
Right, exactly.
Like half people like found out he was white when he died recently. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But she's got this. She's got a pop sound to it, to a lot of the tracks. She crosses over into kind of the adult contemporary, especially with the ballads that are on here, like "Love Will Lead You Back" and I Know the Feeling. You Meant the World to Me. I think there is.
She kind of has like 3 types of tracks on this, right? You got the big ballads.
It's funny you say that. Yes.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'll let you finish. Yeah.
No. I'm just agreeing with you. The ballads, you have kind of
dance bangers, like dance club bangers, and then you've got like quasi like what like Heart in the 80s rock was doing, like, you know, like
or
rock based,
or like what Shania Twain would do later, I would argue.
I would argue this was better than the Shania Twain stuff.
Yeah, but in terms of what she's trying to, like, You Can't Fight Fate, I feel like that could be a later Shania Twain attempt of song. Sure. And then you have like real strong like
yes, you're right about You Can't Fight Fate. It does have vaguely country, Nashville crossover country vibes.
Yep. Yes. And, you know, to the point where that's why Shania Twain sold millions of albums, because she crossed over to multiple audiences. But you have things like, you know, you also have like Phil Collins Genesis type of sound to this on terms of in terms of like the pop and the dance tracks.
I Know the Feeling might be the song that's most like that vibe.
Yeah. Sax comes in sometimes too. That's kind of like in a way that an 80s, you know, Michael Bolton or other type of power ballad would do, like on Heart of Stone specifically. And then the rock element is there as well. Like on Love Will Lead You Back, it's got some like wailing guitar from some session musician, or it's got I'll Be Your Shelter kind of has it does have a rock sound, and her voice really complements that. It's got a
I think that's why the record company wanted her to sing that type of rock, because she's like kind of in some ways born to sing that type of song.
Yep. And you know, in the same way that Tina Turner also kind of skirted the rock sound too. So yeah, it's definitely the first, like, you know, half of the album, I would say, is really strong, and then there's, you know, strengths to the rest of the album, but like the first 4 or 5 tracks really drew me in, and it was enough to carry me like through the rest of the album.
I mean, they're all massive hits too.
Yeah. Right. You know, like we've said, there's always a place and a talent to when you can craft songs that are just so listenable and are massive hits. I mean, that's what the record companies and the music studios do, aim to do.
You know what's funny about this album? Because I'm on the like I love Taylor Dayne's voice. I love someone who can just freaking just belt out a chorus, just go get it, right? A chorus. It's always been a thing, and she's one of the best in terms of doing that, right?
Yeah.
Just even like I think like 2 or 3 years ago, I remember reading that like she'd been on like The Masked Singer and got to the final 5, and people were like outraged that like she'd been like eliminated or whatever, and like even then they like show her like singing like Harry Styles and, you know, like all these different songs, right? And she's still just, and it's hilarious because like The Masked Singer, it's like, well, fuck, this is clearly like, who the hell can't tell this is she's got such a like, I guess you could like, some of the people guessed that she was like Tina Turner, which I get, you know what I mean? But like anybody who'd done this, so that made me laugh, you know. And she's still got the chops, but and it's funny because she's got this voice, and then when you hear her talk, she's like straight Long Island girl, which always makes me laugh. Like straight, like Long Island, like, you know, I'm not gonna say hard as nails, but you know what I'm saying, like, you know, kind of tough girl like vibe, which is funny. But the funniest thing about this is that there are some people I know who I just sort of informally talk about, you know, I do a podcast with my friends, we talk about music, and they'll just sort of say, oh, you know, what type of stuff. And so like this week, for whatever reason, like I had to bring up, like for some reason it came up, you know, the podcast came up with different people, and a couple of the people I were talking to, most of the people I was talking to about it, because it was a group of people, were women between the ages of like 45 and like 53ish, in that area, right? They're like, who you covering? I'm like, there's some obscure acts. Probably the only person, you know, because you're talking to people like me. So I said the only person probably you'd be familiar with who we're covering is like Taylor Dayne, and like the reaction was something like, "Oh, I fucking love Taylor." So like, you know what I mean? Like it's just like, it's just, she inspires that type of thing, and I just start laughing because I remember I happened to have a conversation with my mom this week too. I said, "Oh, guess who we're covering this week?" Well, Taylor Dayne. She said, "Oh my god, I like love her," and so it's just funny because she has this like, you know,
mass appeal on some
level. Just it's like I don't know if Matt will have it, because, you know, he's got an interesting like lineage, right, of pop music, but like I am certain Matt's wife, right, is gonna have like nostalgia. Like I told him, I said, like, listen to this album when you're around your wife, because I'm certain she will like it, because for like girls of a certain age, right, like basically my age and a little older, right, like this is like, she's gonna be remembered just like Madonna and Janet Jackson, like all those people, right? Like, just because there was like a 3 or 4 year window where she was like just omnipresent, right? And so, yeah, I mean, how can you not like the song With Every Beat of My Heart? It's like the ultimate like club banger, you know, in like the sense of just, you can't help but be happy when you hear it. And I'll Be Your Shelter is one of the better examples of like someone doing that, like, you know, pop music with rock elements to it, but not being cheesy. It's kind of like, you know, I know Matt has the nostalgia for like the hair metal, which kind of is the same thing to some degree, but like I like this version of that type of lighter weight rock like 1,000 times more than I like hair metal. So Love Will Lead You Back, like I know that you and Matt haven't always loved what you guys always call adult contemporary, but like, you know, Love Will Lead You Back to some degree foreshadows like what early Mariah Carey was doing to some, you know, singing the equivalent of a standard that just millions and millions of people will like write a YouTube comment like, this reminds me of that time when I like broke up, like of this time, and you know, that type song. And Heart of Stone is, I know what you said, like Michael Bull. I know where you're going for with that, because different stuff like that, but I think it's like kind of a vaguely funky mainstream, you know, song that's designed for mass appeal, but not in a way that's bothersome. And yeah, You Can't Fight Fate is like proto 90s crossover country, right? So there's all different stuff like that. But yeah, just this album just made me smile, both because it's enjoyable to listen to and doesn't ask too much of you, but that's not a bad thing. And also, you know, this is one of the few times where I will co-sign off on the idea of nostalgia, because, you know, when I was a child, when you're not overthinking music, or, you know, it's nothing besides, does this sound good, and, you know, am I able to hear this like 150 times
exactly.
and like it? And yeah, and just, you know, it reminds you of just going to places where you're around your friends and for the first time and stuff like that, for me at least. So
yeah, and there's albums where I appreciate albums sometimes where you don't have to do a lot of work to enjoy it.
No, and this is the definition of that. Yeah.
Right? So, and it works better for me than other kind of like mass artists that we've talked about.
Yeah, you're like bringing in like Diane Warren to write like Love Will Lead You Back. You're just getting like, let's get some songwriters who are going to write standard issue songs, but they sound good, right? You know, kind of the Celine Dion, Mariah Carey template in the 90s. Yeah. So.
Yep. So yeah, good stuff.
Or Whitney Houston in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I had a feeling you'd like this album. And also I had a feeling that you would be surprisingly unaware of who Taylor Dayne is, which is almost impossible. Like, because I get the feeling that like Matt may not like this album, but there's no way he won't know who she is. Yes. Yeah. It's like, yeah. So that's, I think, where the funny. What do you think? We guessed on Matt. What do you think he's gonna feel about this one?
I mean, I think he's gonna like it.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, I think he'll. I mean, he won't have anything bad to say about it. I don't know if he'll love it, but
yeah. Well, it's funny because he listened to the first album in entirety before this one. Because I guess the second we did it, he like listened to the albums. So So he'll probably have listened to this and the first one. The first one is much more in the dance pop area.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll give you a small homework assignment that'll be super easy. I'd listen to the big 3 tracks on that album, Josh. Listen to like Don't Rush Me, Tell It to My Heart, and Prove Your Love. And if you want to go for the 4 top 10 hits, you could throw in I'll Always Love You if you want a comparative point. So
Sounds
those
good.
those veer in there. I'm reading the amount of time. It will take you about 10 minutes to listen to this 4 songs, so just so you know. Yeah.
Yep.
So
good stuff.
yeah, I give this one a thumbs up, but in a completely different way than, maybe some of the other albums. But
right.
And I want us to continue to lean into, and we're going to, because in upcoming weeks, right? We're gonna have Bobby Brown, we're gonna have New Kids on the Block.
Yep.
I know in the '90s we've bookmarked some spots for like, Britney Spears, and I think there's a Backstreet Boys album in there. So it's not going to be the primary focus, but I do want to at least analyze some of these things, because how can you not tell the story of a decade without the stuff that was the most popular stuff?
Right. Also, I think as an aside, I think a micro-generational hallmark is your affinity to roller rinks and kind of that culture. Like I feel like
I think that's also a New Jersey thing, that there
maybe
were a lot more there.
Yeah, because that was not something that was really part of my life growing up.
Yeah, I think
but we
that
moved around a lot too, so maybe it was a Northeastern thing even more. I don't know.
Yeah, I just think it's maybe situationally where I use that as also shorthand, Josh, for like the mall or movie theaters or
just hanging out,
diners, or like anywhere where I could have. I bet the diners another classic television from New Jersey, but like kind of like anywhere where between the ages of 8 to 14 you could have hung out and heard mass consumed music.
Right.
Well, I was gonna say it's kind of crazy to think about, but like in today's day and age, right? But like there are surprisingly large amounts of time where I was hanging out with my friends as like a 10-year-old, loosely supervised, compared to like nowadays where like they don't even like allow 17-year-olds, right, to like
it's a
not
big
be
difference.
Around adults. So I certainly, my parents were not negligent, but maybe that's like that like
man, there were
latchkey child, maybe like
there were large stretches of time where I was out on a bike like for hours and hours, like in different
I was
places.
out on a bike with the, or going somewhere where my parents had no real concept of where I and later I took that further where I would get on a train and just end up places, but but also like I'm saying, the amount of times where I was driven somewhere and dropped off in a public place, like a mall, right? And it's funny because like nowadays people are like obsessed with child abduction in an era when it's almost impossible to get abducted by a family member, and it's like, here, let's deliver you to a place where it is much easier to do this, and no one even thought twice. So that's a true aside, but so when I say roller rinks, Josh, I'm we went to plenty, don't get me wrong, but I'm using it as shorthand for basically anywhere where 8 to 14-year-olds. It's kind of like that show Kids Incorporated, Josh, where like the kids showed up at this place and started a band and somehow ran this restaurant and music club, and there were like really no adults, and you're like, how did this thing happen? And it's like, oh, maybe it's sort of like my friends and I just at the mall, and we just decided to get industrious, so
magical realism.
And I don't even know if Kids Incorporated is something that it certainly will be something Matt recognizes.
I do remember vaguely.
Gotcha.
That
Young Fergie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. So so anyway. Yeah, if you need a pick me up, you could do a lot worse than
for sure
than this album. So